Okay, so I'm going to talk about women, which means that at least half of you will be really interested about my talk, and maybe the other half will also be really interested, but for the wrong reasons. We're going to talk about women who are doing extraordinary things in entrepreneurship and in technology. And what we really want to analyze today is why is it that there are so few women in technology and creating companies all over the globe, including Silicon Valley, not just in Greece and in Europe. And having identified that, why is it we care about women being more involved in entrepreneurship? And why is that we can actually improve the situation that we have today by using very simple measures? So first of all, I'll tell you why I care about females in tech and entrepreneurship. When I was a very little girl, one of my first memories is somebody I knew told me, "Rebecca, you're such a bright girl, you have so much potential. If only were you a boy, you could do anything you want." So that really marked me when I was a kid, and every single decision in my childhood, I chose to do things that were typically activities that men liked and where men excelled. So for example, one of my pastimes in high school was to participate in every Olympiad I could. Physics, chemistry, math, and of course, the community in those sectors was always very male-dominated. Then I applied to MIT. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to be one of those typical role models who are, male and they build things. And I wanted to be in one of these pictures, which, by the way, is one of the front pages of the MIT Computer Science department. So it's very sexy, as you see. And then I realized one day, I'm doing a lot of things where everybody I meet is men. So I'm going to join a club, a sports club, where I can liaise with a women, an all-women's team, and I joined the MIT rugby team. And they still look like men. So this is really my life story. There's a saying at MIT actually that says that the odds are really good because there's so many men for every woman, but the goods are really odd. And I ended up in a place like this. This was actually 2 weeks ago. MIT chose their top 10 innovators under 35 years old. And this picture was repeated almost in every country, where you had mostly men being the innovators of our generation, and very few women, if only. And I kept wondering, there must be women out there who are doing extraordinary things, who are innovating, and why aren't they visible? Why aren't they on these pictures that we see? So about 4 years ago, we started a company, a project, where we were analyzing the composition of teams in startups and how that affected the performance of those companies. Really looking at diversity, the gender ratio, the age ratio, and many other qualities of the founders that integrated these founding teams and how that actually affected the performance and the likelihood to succeed of these startups. We reached some conclusions that I will share with you today. Now I'm actually really proud to report that the company that I lead and founded, Unoodle, is 50% female. And this is actually really a great accomplishment in Silicon Valley if you also take into account the engineering team. As you see, my co-founder, who's Danish Thorsten, and then our team, we have 9 nationalities and exactly 50% women in our team of 20 today. And what we do is actually create a community, a platform, where entrepreneurs can showcase what they're working on and also meet the resources that they need. We're trying to bring meritocracy back to the startup world. Okay, so why do we care about women being in startups? Women actually have been known in studies in Dow Jones report recently that startups with executives who are women are more likely to succeed. This is a fact, statistical fact. The second point is that women-led startups have been identified by Kauffman Foundation as the key component to create jobs. And third, as you have seen probably many social entrepreneurship microfinance projects, a lot of the loans were focused on giving to women, because women have much higher rates of repayment than men. So microfinance, the whole movement was enabled also by women. In addition, women are the ideal consumers of technology today. They're the leading consumers of social networks, of devices like iPhones and Kindles. They're the leading consumers of also all sorts of technologies. If you have a location-based application, women are actually your #1 priority as a consumer segment. They're also the highest growing group of internet usage. So if you think about women being your most important consumer and growing segment in the population, wouldn't you want to have those women in your discussion tables when you're brainstorming about products that could be really hits and successful in the market? But here's the problem. There is a huge gender gap today. Of all entrepreneurial activity measured by Kaufman, only 35% of women were considered to engage in any type of entrepreneurial activity, compared to double that rate in men. Also, if you look at firms that have more than $1 million in revenue, you find that women are participating in only a third of the equivalent number for men who are leading or founding these companies that are successful and have revenue. Even more staggering, if you look at board seats, if you look at faculty, female faculty and male faculty, only 6.5% of women are in board seats of technical firms, versus the 95 almost percent of men who are participating in board committees and seats in technical firms. So that's really a huge disparity between faculty who are female and male. And finally, when you look at the founding composition of teams, in Silicon Valley the ratio is 10 to 9, so basic 90. So out of every 10 companies that you look at, only one of them will have a technical or a female founder versus the 9 that you have in the case of men. So we have an opportunity here. Women are the consumers you want. They have a lot of expertise. Obviously, they are engaging in a lot of education and technology. They graduate actually in higher rates in most countries than many men in higher degrees, but they're not participating in the creation of the products and the startups that are going to grow the economy. So what is the problem? The problem is actually it starts with our role models. Right now, if you're a young woman and you want to consider the career of technology or entrepreneurship, you have two very different ends of the spectrum. You have somebody like Meg Whitman, who was the CEO of eBay, who's known in the field and perceived as a very aggressive, almost manly person. Or you have the case of Hermione Wei. She's actually one of the stars of a new reality show on Silicon Valley, published by Bravo. Have you guys heard about that? There's a new reality show. So she's the protagonist of that show, and there has been a lot of controversy on how her femininity, very exaggerated, has brought down Silicon Valley to a dumber level, for example, which is a quote that was cited in VentureBeat. So you really have two options. You either become a bikini model who pretends to be an entrepreneur, or you become a very manly, aggressive woman that you can relate to, you can really identify yourself with. So no wonder why a lot of young women are not pursuing these careers, because they are not really relatable examples for them. And that's why I mentioned the topic of anti-hero. I know this may be a suicidal thing to define a very Greek terminology by a foreigner in a Greek audience, but I'm really intrigued by this concept of having personalities that have the talent, have the extraordinary powers, but they're not able to become the heroes, the role models. They have this shortcoming, and we see that over and over in the case of women who are successful. A very stark example is actually Marissa Mayer. She became the CEO of Yahoo recently after having a tenure at Google that was extremely successful. She was in charge of search, and she's not only very bright, she's really young as well. She's only 37 years old. But when she got the job at Yahoo to become the CEO, there was this outcry because she was pregnant, and she had a baby that was going to be born and was born now in October. And a lot of people were saying, how can you trust a woman who's pregnant to have a job that's so high pressured and stressed when you don't know when she's going to take a maternity leave? So she said, don't worry, I'm going to have my baby, and no matter what happens, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be back at the office. which set a very high standard for other women out there who want to have also a balanced family life. So you have these controversies every single time when you have a female successful founder on what are the things that they have to sacrifice, or what is it that you have to give up? They can't do it all. And many people on the other sector were saying, when you have male founders or CEOs, this discussion never even happens because it doesn't matter what your personal life is. So what we have right now are a few, I would even call them anti-heroes that are our role models, and what we need is to change that and have role models that are more approachable and identifiable to us. So just to go over some of these issues, let's dig deeper into the issues that we have today. So I mentioned the lack of role models. We don't have females that are feminine and that are successful and that we can look up to becoming like her. But there's also a lot of self-victimization. I don't know if you have ever heard different groups saying, well, I can't do this because I'm a woman and society doesn't support me, or I can't do this because I'm a foreigner in the US and the policies for immigrants is really harsh or tough. So there are a lot of reasons why we can't do things. There's also a lot of reasons for entrepreneurs to not be able to do things. I don't have money, I don't have support, my family doesn't support what I do. But it is time for us, for a lot of us women, to stop focusing on the things we don't have and start focusing on the things that we actually have as an advantage. One thing is that we obviously have a very different perspective of what consumers want, being in the segment that's growing the fastest. Also, women have been proven to bring a very interesting, creative and out-of-the-box thinking to some of these brainstorming discussions. So really highlighting and discovering the areas in which women tend to have a very successful time is much healthier than focusing on the issues that are preventing women from advancing. And I think that's something that we really need to do in order to change our mindset and what we can do as women to advance our career opportunities. The third thing, this is actually a very interesting phenomenon that I have observed throughout my career. When you are in this field dominated by men, and there are 5 or 6 women that are notorious or famous, then there's this perception by women that there's only 3, 4, 5 spots for women. So we start fighting with each other. And I have seen more women trying to backstab each other than men with women or men with men who are trying to compete with each other. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Somehow somebody let us believe that there are only a very scarce number of spots for women, therefore we need to fight for it dirty if it requires to be cheating in those situations. So that's a fallacy. There are plenty of opportunities for all women, and as soon as we start working with each other in helping advance the level for everybody, just like I quoted here, when the tides rise, all the boats rise with the tide. And that's extremely important for women to take into account. And finally, a lot of the connections that these programs for women are putting together are to connect women with women. But as I mentioned, women are not on those board seats. They're not usually in those positions of power that we need to make decisions on investments or in providing access to knowledge and network. So what we really need to do is actually create a network where women and women with a lot of potential are connected to women and men so that they can have equal access to opportunities and not only paired with the women in the field. So, talking about exemplary models, just to end with some inspiration, I have 2 heroes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but I strongly encourage you guys to do some research when you go home. One of them is Anusha Ansari. She's not one of the women who's always bragging and boasting about what she has done. She's a very low-key, down-to-earth, very successful female entrepreneur, originally from Iran, who became a successful tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, but afterwards she became also the first space tourist on a commercial flight who was a female. So when you hear her talk, you really want to be like her, and she has really covered a lot of the different aspects that were generally male-dominated. The second role model that I have, she was my master's thesis advisor, is Susan Murcutt, who's an MIT professor, but also she created a number of social enterprises to help solve the problem of water scarcity, the lack of access to drinkable water, and wastewater systems in the world. And finally, since I mentioned so many problems and some of the ideas on how we can solve this, Rani Commissar and Christina Broadbeck and I are actually starting a global initiative to change the paradigm on how we actually help women. Rani is a very famous VC at Kleiner Perkins in Silicon Valley, arguably the #1 VC in the Valley. And he's also an author and has been very active in helping and mentoring entrepreneurs from all over the world. Now his focus is going to be in helping female entrepreneurs and technologists from all over the world. Christina is the first female at YouTube. She was the founding team member and the designer who put together YouTube Mobile and all of the initial designs that you saw on the website for YouTube. So we're going to actually start an initiative, and we would love to involve some of you guys. I have already talked to a couple of you in the audience, but in putting together a global network of support for women who are interested in careers in technology and entrepreneurship. So on that note, actually, I would like to show you a brief video by Randy, who wanted to say hello and tell you a few words of wisdom, and then we'll conclude with that.
There's lots of talk about male and female-led entrepreneurs and ventures. The thing that's important is that we have both. What's really important is that women be well represented in solving tomorrow's problems. Those problems are as much a part of their lives as it is a part of any of the male gender's lives. And more importantly, I think women bring a different perspective. Women bring an opportunity to think differently about a holistic problem, and they have the same chance for success that any man does.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.